Welcome to The Landscape, your show about America's parks and public lands. I'm Aaron Weiss with the Center for Western Priorities in Denver. Kate is out today, so I am your solo fireworks show. We've got a great interview coming up with Tracy Stone-Manning, the former head of the Bureau of Land Management, now heading up the Wilderness Society. She and I sat down in person last month to talk about the big picture here, not just the bad stuff that's happening across our public lands right now, but how all of it also presents an opportunity for a new vision for the outdoors. I'm very excited for all of you to hear that. But first, let's do the news. The Great American State Fair opened on the National Mall this week, and it is going about as poorly as you'd expect. The 16-day event is supposed to celebrate the country's 250th birthday. Day one delivered power outages, a Ferris wheel that shut down for 2 hours when the generator failed, and an entire ice cream selection that melted before anyone could eat it. Boneless wings were also unavailable. West Virginia's booth, which let visitors race a driving simulator while singing Take Me Home Country Roads, got shut down by a broken air conditioner. And the bigger problem is that almost no one is there. At least 10 states and territories declined to send delegations at all. A retired teacher from Massachusetts was so bothered that her state skipped it, she drove 9 hours and staffed the empty booth herself, handing out maple syrup, which I will note is more of a Vermont thing. And as of today, Monday, you can see from Fox News' live set on the mall, there aren't many folks there aside from the Fox News hosts. Right next door, the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool is still a mess. Quick recap if you have wisely been watching the World Cup rather than the news these last couple weeks. The administration spent more than $15 million in money from national park entrance fees to repaint the bottom of the pool American flag blue. Within weeks, the water turned green with algae. Sheets of that new blue coating started peeling off and floating to the top. I was there 2 weeks ago, got some incredible video of them draining water that looked closer to high-C ecto-cooler. The company that did the work, Atlantic Industrial Coatings, got that job on a no-bid contract. It now says some areas need repairs, but insists that doesn't mean the liner failed. Coatings experts who have looked at the photos keep landing in the same place. This looks like a rushed coating job to hit a July 4th deadline. It never cured properly. It doesn't help that a presidential motorcade drove across the wet surface back in May. Now, instead of admitting the job went wrong, the administration is insisting the pool was vandalized, and they are doubling down. Over the weekend, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum went on Fox News and vowed full prosecution. He says investigators believe someone cut a 350-foot-long gash in the liner with a box cutter. Trump has claimed that vandals poured fertilizer in the water to grow the algae. Needless to say, there is no evidence of any of that. This is one of the most patrolled and surveilled sites in the country. If there was video of any vandals, we would have seen it by now. What evidence does exist points the other way. The one specific thing on the record is a National Park Service court filing saying the liner was cut with a sharp knife or a razor on June 9th. That filing notably does not call it vandalism. In other words, it's kind of suggesting that might have been made by a contractor. Regardless, a single cut does not explain all the algae and peeling across the entire pool floor. The arrest numbers are moving as well. 5, 6, 7 people maybe now, maybe somewhere between 14 and 18 police reports filed. The only person arrested whose name is public is a former Olympic kayaker. He told the Washington Post he's just a curious guy who reached down to feel the lining, and whoops, you're getting arrested by the National Guard. The communications director at the Interior Department has gone even further, tying the pool to a broader sabotage trend that supposedly includes 8647 graffiti. Someone writing in their own blood on the Washington Monument and, quote, the cutting of fuel lines around the Great American State Fair, so even the melted ice cream has a villain too now. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, posting from maternity leave, called the coverage of this mess proof that the media is truly deranged. She went on Hannity to mock protesters in algae costumes as deranged leftists. The replies under her posts have not been kind, most of them making the same point. The simplest explanation for peeling paint is just bad paint. The big picture here, the government knows exactly what it spent, who it hired on this no-bid contract, and how the work was done. Instead of showing any of that, it's arresting people for touching a pool and blaming melted ice cream on a phantom army of vandals. It's easy to dismiss these lies as stupid CYA moves by an embarrassed administration, but it's not happening in a vacuum, and this is where it gets serious. This weekend, 3 federal wildland firefighters were killed along the Colorado-Utah border when a fire burned over. They weren't able to escape. They set up their fire shelters. 2 other members of their team survived but were seriously injured. This is a tragedy. We don't know yet if it was an avoidable tragedy, but we have to find out. Wildland firefighters like Bobby Scopa, she was a guest on this podcast a few months back, they've been warning that federal wildland fire crews are at risk because of the Trump administration's staffing cuts, especially to the red cards, those support staff who aren't frontline firefighters but who get called into action or support roles during fire season. Grassroots wildland firefighters just released a survey this month. They found nearly 2/3 of federal wildland firefighters say their units are operating below full strength. So in any normal functioning administration, regardless of party, there would immediately be an investigation into the deaths of the 3 firefighters this weekend. There would be no question that the public and the families of the firefighters would see that report and that changes would quickly be made if there were operational or policy failures that contributed to the tragedy. But today, there is zero reason to believe that will happen under Doug Burgum, Brooke Rollins, and the Trump administration. As we've seen during the reflecting pool fiasco, these people will shamelessly lie about anything to cover their asses. That's amusing or sad when it's just wasting money on an algae pool or a flop of a state fair. But when you have 3 dead firefighters and we are heading into a drought-fueled fire season, the track record of lies and cover-ups is flat out dangerous. We shouldn't have to rely on states and third parties to do a thorough investigation, but that's where we are. Because Doug Burgum's own behavior has shown what comes next. Even if there is an investigation into this weekend's tragedy, the odds are close to 0 that the Trump administration will be honest about what it finds. That is a terrible thought for the families here, for every wildland firefighter in America, and for everybody who lives in fire country. Our guest today is Tracy Stone-Manning, president of the Wilderness Society, former director of the Bureau of Land Management under President Biden, and now, I believe, 3-time guest here on The Landscape. The first time was like 8-9 years ago, so welcome back.
Thank you. 3rd time feels like the charm to me.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So at the end of March, USDA announced that it was going to move Forest Service headquarters to Salt Lake City. They're going to close all 9 regional offices, replace them with 15 state offices, and consolidate research stations basically down to just a handful, mostly coordinated actually here out of Fort Collins. This obviously feels a whole lot like what happened at the Bureau of Land Management during the Trump administration when they tried to move the headquarters to Grand Junction. That was an epic failure. You came in the aftermath of that. So when you look at this Forest Service announcement as someone who actually had to rebuild an agency after a reorg, what jumps out as the most consequential or maybe foolish piece of what they're planning to do here?
Yeah, Aaron, I think it's intentional disruption, right? They watched what happened with BLM. Wasn't good. Yeah. And what the hardest thing that happened for the Bureau of Land Management was people walked out the door. Rather than being moved, rather than uprooting their families, they left. And with them left hundreds of years of understanding about how things are supposed to work, how the government is supposed to deliver for the American people.
You told High Country News that you expect the results would be pretty similar. Even more dire was your quote. So walk us through then what that loss of expertise means at the agency level and therefore means in all of these field offices and state offices.
Yeah, government is supposed to work, right? And
One hopes.
One hopes. And when government works well, the public doesn't see it, right? Things just work. Campgrounds are open. The water is clean. There's toilet paper in the bathrooms. The trails are cleared. Things just work, right? And that requires people. Requires people doing that work. And it requires people to know how to do that work. And this kind of willy-nilly, very disruptive, almost shotgun approach to kind of reorg feels to me like it's going to cause chaos, right? And when people who know how things work leave, right? Like normally if something goes wrong, you say, oh my God, call Mary, she knows how to fix that.
Yeah.
Mary doesn't pick up the phone. Mary is not there to fix it, right? And so things just begin to kind of fray at the seams. And I mean, we all experienced that actually during the pandemic, if you think about it, right? Things just started to break.
One day there's no toilet paper on the shelves.
And exactly, things just start to break. And none of us quite understood why. And it's because people weren't going to work.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's this played out on our public lands.
Why? I mean, is the goal, in fact, to inflict pain, or is there a bigger picture?
I think it's both, right? Russell Vogt, who runs the Office of Management and Budget at the White House, is very clear. He said, we want to inflict trauma on employees.
That was part of the Project 2025.
We want to traumatize employees, like job well done. That is happening. But in that trauma, in that gutting of the agencies, the ultimate result is going to be people are going to throw up their hands and say, why doesn't this work? Why the government is broken? They can't manage these public lands, right? Somebody else needs to manage these public lands. The feds can't do it. And I am certain that will be the outcome unless we reverse course here in the coming years.
The argument being, well, clearly the feds can't do this, so it is states, it's privatization,
right.
You know, any or all of those,
right.
do you think?
Exactly. And here's the thing, right? The argument heretofore has been, well, the states can't afford to do this work.
Sure.
And the biggest ticket item for managing public lands for the states is fire.
And national forests, obviously, even more so.
And even more so. If we create a national fire service, we have solved that problem, right? And so we can turn over these lands to the states because we got you covered on the fire.
So the idea is the feds pick up the costs, the
Yep.
big cost center, and the states gain all the benefits.
Exactly.
And therefore, to pay for it, in terms of the Forest Service, then, is the ultimate argument, well, they have to somehow pay for themselves, so if you chop down all the trees, nothing burns?
Or they find out we're not paying for the campgrounds by chopping down the trees, so, oh, shoot, we still need to sell off public lands, right? The argument will be, we've solved this for the states because the biggest ticket item is fire. That'll be the argument. But the outcome will still be the same. It is expensive to manage public lands.
It is expensive
right?
to fight fires.
And serve the public and to keep the campgrounds open. It just costs money.
Yeah.
And it costs putting people to work on our public lands. So I don't know if this is intentional or not. I do know what the outcome will be, and it is sell-off. So we need to stop it.
In 2019, in 2021, when you came in at BLM, you inherited the aftermath of that failed reorg. Yeah. Hundreds of years of collective knowledge had walked out the door. So what were your conversations with staff like that week, or that first month as you walk in and essentially assess a charred landscape?
I said thank you to somebody who's in the senior executive service, meaning full career, and his eyes welled up.
Wow.
And he said, nobody said that to me in a long time, right? A basic, decent courtesy. So we started there. And what I did was turn to the people who are still left and say, I need your help. I don't know how things are supposed to work. I'm walking in the door. Tell me. I couldn't assess what had gone missing because I hadn't been there before. And so I asked very intentional questions about, tell me what's missing and how can we solve for that? And yet I still saw how things just didn't work the way they were supposed to. So the headquarters for land management agencies provides expertise to the field. So for example, a field office does a resource management plan, once every 15, 20 years?
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. And so their muscle memory on how to do a resource management plan isn't quite there because they do it once every couple decades. So they pick up the phone and they call Washington and they say, headquarters, and they say, hey, walk me through how I'm supposed to do this plan. And the people who were answering the phone in headquarters were all brand new to their jobs, had not been mentored by the people who had been there forever. And so they were finding their way together, right? It just wasn't as well oiled as it was supposed to be.
Because everyone is learning back at the same time because you've lost that institutional
right.
memory.
And why would you call headquarters if you're not going to actually get the help you need? Sure. And the institutional memory, you just sort of figure it out on your own.
So I guess that brings us to the current BLM director who just walked in the door this week. And certainly we've talked about Steve Pierce a whole lot on this podcast. I assume your opinion of what's about to happen is not great. But if you did have some words of advice, either for Steve Pierce or for those senior executives who are coming into a real big unknown right now, what's that message?
So my advice would be the career staff you are serving are really good at what they do. And so the director should turn to them for not only help, but turn to them to say, what do you need? Job of the director is to run downfield, plow downfield for you, give you the space to do your job. So tell me how to do that. And what I gather is, at the moment, things have been paralyzed. They've been waiting for a director. It's very clear that orders are coming, if not from the Secretary's office, from the White House. They're not coming from headquarters. And the director, as he comes in, will have the opportunity to tell the Secretary's office and to tell the White House, hey, here's what we actually need, right? And to implement your agenda. Right? Not an agenda I would agree with, but the director will have the ability to say, hold on a minute.
we need to do something here.
You might have thrown the baby out with the bathwater here. You're not going to be able to be energy dominant if there's nobody in the field office to issue permits, for example. Right.
Right. Or why are we holding a lease sale of 80,000 acres in northern Arizona where there's no oil?
Where there's no oil,
for instance.
Right.
Do you have a read from folks you've heard from how much in this interim period where there was no director was this Karen Bud Phelan, the number 3 at Interior, effectively acting as BLM director, or were they truly rudderless?
I heard a lot of rudderless.
Okay.
On the day-to-day, right? And on day-to-day decision-making, or, hey, we need somebody in Washington should know this. And it was just a little unclear who that should be, right? So I heard rudderless.
Rudderless, interesting. Which I guess takes us then back to the Forest Service. And Tom Schultz, who's the chief forester, talking about modernizing the Forest Service. Obviously, there's this reorg, which doesn't make any sense. But is there a version of modernize the Forest Service that would make sense? What would that look like in a more functional administration, Republican or Democrat?
Oh, that's a great question, right? So modernizing the Forest Service means preparing it for the challenges of our times, right? Forest Service is a very old agency, and much of its structure was created for olden times.
Predates BLM.
Predates BLM. Good example. A district office. The size of a district office was originally created because it was made as big as the time it took for a district ranger to get on his horse and ride across the district
Wild.
in one day. That is what defined the boundaries of a district, right? So we probably could rethink that.
Sure.
But if we look to the challenges of our time, when the Forest Service was created, when the law that guides the Forest Service was created, climate change was not an understood phenomenon. It is changing our forests and our rivers in real time. And so the research required to understand that change in real time comes from research stations. So step one, don't fire all your scientists. Step two, the recreational aspects of the Forest Service were always sort of tangential, right? And now it's a driver. Right, people love to go play on our forests, right? Hunt, fish, camp, spend the weekend there. Like, it's why people love our public lands. And so modernizing the agency means really specifically managing for that. And then third, fire on our landscape is like nothing we've ever seen. And understanding the role of fire and understanding the threat of fire, they are two different things that overlap. And really staffing up for that makes a whole lot of sense. Creating one big fire agency where we decouple a land manager from fire will be disastrous.
Because fire has to be part of land management, not just land defense.
Absolutely, right? A land manager makes decisions in context, and that context includes fire, right? And if they're not able to manage for that, you're setting up that land manager to fail.
Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary, announced effectively a return to the 10 a.m. policy at Interior, which a disastrous policy in place for 100 years in forests that said any fire that breaks out, the policy is to have it out by 10 a.m. the next day. And we now know through a century of science that we, in fact, needed that fire on the landscape. Yeah. The Forest Service, at least for now, has not officially said that, but what have you heard or seen from folks on the inside when they are hearing about policies like that? I mean, are they recognizing this is going to hamstring them? Are they just hoping to work around it? Like, how does an announcement like that play out among the workforce?
I talked to one fire guy, a smoke jumper, who said, it's terrible policy. He said, I worked all summer as a result, but it's terrible policy.
Yeah.
And it's terrible policy because it's got it. Just precisely what you just said. It got us in the mess we're in, right? Fire suppression on the landscape has created tinder boxes out there that are ready to go, and so repeating the mistakes of history is not modernizing, right?
A couple more questions on mistakes before we move on to fixing them. The day you taped an episode with our friends over at The Wild Idea was the day that the public lands rule was formally rescinded. And I know how much work you put into that as director. We see that the roadless rule at the Forest Service may be a couple days or weeks away from being formally ended, and that's a Clinton-era policy. We saw Congress use the Congressional Review Act to overturn the mineral withdrawal at the boundary waters. A whole lot of really bad things all happening at once. Yeah. Of those or other stuff that is happening right now, what's going to be the hardest to come back from, or what do you think of these repeals is going to be the stickiest?
I think that the administration is overplaying its hand on our public lands. And I think people are getting really mad about it. And I think a big backlash is coming as a result. And there is incredible power in backlash, right? And I am excited about what that power will wield. So if those very three things that you just talked about, the public lands rule really just said, hey, we want you to manage for the health of the landscape, right? We want to make sure that we are keeping the health of the landscape in mind so that we can deliver these lands to future generations. Terribly radical. Right? The roadless rule saying, hey, we think we have enough roads on the landscape with a $7 billion backlog of maintenance and the ability, if we were to stretch those roads to the moon, to drive to the moon and halfway back. We got enough roads on the landscape. And instead, now we're going to be saddled with more financial liability, more liability around fire because...
Right. We know that roads and fire go hand in hand.
That roads and fire go hand in hand. Science proves it. Science that we've done at TWS proves it. And the mineral withdrawal at the boundary waters, I mean, what that mineral withdrawal did was give 20 years for Congress to get its act together to say, this place is just too risky to mine in, so we're going to protect it for the long haul. So now, at the local level, they'll battle that mine permit out, right? And I have no doubt that advocates for the boundary waters are going to win in the end because there should not be a mine there.
There's no science that says, oh yeah, there's a safe way to do this in this place.
No science and not one single example in this country where you can build a mine in rock like that and not permanently pollute. So the backlash, I think, will create the ability for people to say enough. And here's the thing. That the kind of work that the last administration did, it left a watermark, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're going to build from the watermark. And that feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That brings us to ground shift, which is, you want to call it an initiative? Initiative?
Yeah.
It's not quite a group, but it's trying to reopen the door to public lands management, public lands law. Like how big is the scope here of what you've got folks thinking about?
I mean, we are sitting and looking at a view that goes for miles and miles and miles, right? With big blue sky. That's the scope, right? Think big. We have, I think, a remarkable, perhaps once in a lifetime, once in a century opportunity here. The administration, I think, is so overplaying their hands. They are tearing down our institutions. They're tearing down our land management agencies. So whomever comes in is going to need a plan to rebuild them. And who in their right mind would rebuild exactly the way we have today, which was built for the century we came from, not the one we're walking into, right? So we have a minute to think about, well, what should the structure be? And then what should the law and policy be to deliver that structure? We could ask a very simple question, like, what do you want your public lands and waters to be in 50 years? And if we ask that question of the American people, we're going to get a very consistent and beautiful answer, right? It's going to be beautiful because we know what people want, right? And so we need to build the structure and the laws to get us there. And I think we're going to have an opportunity to do that.
One of the things I noticed right away is the breadth of opinions that you're bringing in. I saw a piece by Brian Yablonsky, from PERC, Property Environment Research Center, a very, I don't want to say right-wing, but certainly libertarian-leaning think tank. I'd imagine that PERC and the Wilderness Society don't necessarily see eye to eye on a lot of policies. Number one, why cast that wide a net? And number two, are you okay if some of the solutions that come out of this aren't necessarily things that TWS has traditionally argued for?
Yeah. So for starters, it's why we're creating an independent initiative called Ground Shift, right? Because the initiative has to do things that are bigger than the Wilderness Society. The Wilderness Society has a beautiful mission to unite people to protect America's wild places. The work that we have to do for the coming century includes that very clearly, but it's bigger than that. How do we deliver the minerals we need to drive a clean energy economy? How do we accommodate 500 million people who visit our public lands? How do we cut our peace with public lands, right? It's a bigger mission, which is why we created an independent initiative to do that. And why is it center right to center left? Because the answers that drive the next century need to be durable. And good ideas come from all corners. And part of the problem in our country right now is we don't ask the various corners for their ideas. And that kind of dialogue around our common ground is going to be really important.
Of the pieces that Ground Shift has published so far, are there any that stick out to you that surprised you when you read them and you're like, wow, I hadn't thought about it in that way before?
Yeah. Justin Padot, law professor in Arizona, wrote a piece basically saying, hey, is multiple use like lived past its time?
Ooh, okay.
And should we really, I'm gonna destroy his beautiful legal thinking. Sorry in advance, Justin. Should we zone our public lands? We know where the minerals are. We know where the high potential for oil and gas is. We know the places that need to be protected. Shouldn't we just
say, yeah, we're hiking
that
here, we're drilling here,
exactly.
We're mining here.
Should we do that?
Yeah.
And should we expect that we need to manage for multiple use everywhere?
Yeah.
And I think that's I realized it was a provocative question when it pinged into my head when I was hiking, and I thought, oh, Justin's in there. Yeah. And it's a really interesting thing to think about, and it's exactly the kind of thinking we want Ground Shift to do. Take a moment to think and reassess our assumptions. I ran a multiple use agency at BLM and loved it. I used to say we do hashtag all the things, but should it? It's a good question.
Or should we draw some lines?
Yes.
First, it kind of, and I mean that's talking about reopening FLPMA for what it's worth, right?
Totally. Yes.
A 50-year-old law, and let's say, okay, well that was good for 50 years. What have we learned?
Yeah.
All right, just play that one out. Like, okay, so Justin's on to something. How would you go to Congress and say, okay, we're going to start drawing some lines? What would that process potentially look like? Because I'd imagine messy.
It would be messy, but it would also be honest, right? One of the things I think that everybody wants to solve for is the back and forth between political administrations, the pendulum. And when I say that, I need to also pause and say, to be clear, what is happening right now is not a pendulum swing.
No, this
it
is
unprecedented, right? But before now, people were tiring of the pendulum swing, and the same old fights had over and over in different ways. So could we get more honest about what are we expecting from this landscape in these places, and what do we want to pass on to our children, and cut our deal, right? Yeah. It's an interesting question. It may or may not play out.
I guess similarly, so that's the possibility of rewriting FLPMA. The Taylor Grazing Act was written in the Dust Bowl era. The General Mining Act, 1872, still in effect. So if you had to say to Congress or a future president, okay, this is the one foundational law we're going to go in and rewrite first.
Oh, no way. That's such an unfair question.
Where do you start?
Oh, my God, Aaron. Where would you start? I think the no-brainer is the 1872 mining law.
It just doesn't fit for any purpose.
I mean, it did a really nice job for the purpose it was intended.
Settling the West.
Settling the West. Check. We've done that. And here's the part where, like, some of your listeners probably don't know about the Mining Act. That is such a head scratcher. everything is open unless it is closed. And so therefore, at these very, very, very strapped land management agencies, they are consistently doing a paperwork churn every 20 years, 10 years to close places that are no-brainers. Like that campground, we're not going to dig a mine there. That church, that graveyard, like fill in all the blanks.
And you just have to keep renewing that constantly.
Over and over and over again.
It's busy work.
It's busy work that pulls land managers onto their computer screens doing busy work to keep some bad actors from playing gotcha, to say, oh my gosh, they didn't renew the withdrawal, so I'm going to stake a claim and I'm going to make them buy me out.
Right.
Right? That's nonsense. We should fix that.
Right. Those should just be permanently off the table. And I guess that gets back to if you draw the lines to begin with and say, yes, we know there are minerals here, this is where we can mine, then
Yes.
that makes that a whole lot simpler.
A whole lot simpler. Like our oil and gas, oil companies nominate places to go lease, right? Everything's not open. They have to ask for it, right?
Last question. When we talked a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, you said that what gave you hope was the lands themselves and the people who love them. We are now here a year later, and it is, I'm going to go ahead and say, as bleak or bleaker than we thought it might have been. So what is the smallest, most specific thing that is giving you hope still right now?
Two things. It's still the people, right? I'm here in Colorado. I just went to Elevate Colorado last night, a beautiful gathering of people who love their public lands, work for and around their public lands. Thousands, tens of thousands of people are coming for outside days over the next several days.
Great lineup.
And yes, and I was also here to do some of that ground shift work that we were just talking about. We had 75 people in a room from center right to center left doing very hard work. And what was abundantly clear was that we had common ground on what we want our public lands to be in 50 and 100 years. So that gives, even in this incredibly divided time, people are still coming together and finding common ground. That gives me hope. And then just getting out there. Like I tell my colleagues all the time, go outside.
Yeah.
And I implore your listeners to go outside. And nature is amazing, and nature gives us lessons. Nature thrives on disruption. We are in disruption. Beautiful things can come from that.
What a great place to leave it. Tracy Stone-Manning of the Wilderness Society, and helping to launch Ground Shift and inspiring us all to get outside. Thank you.
Thanks,
so
Aaron.
much for returning today.
Yeah, a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, a little good news, we could certainly use it. Earlier this month, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee unanimously advanced the bipartisan America the Beautiful Act, which is a bill that will renew the Legacy Restoration Fund that pays for repairs to the actual deferred maintenance backlog across the national park system, plus wildlife refuges, forests, BLM lands. Again, passed unanimously in that committee in this Congress. It still has a ways to go, but it is a reminder that fixing public lands with money and a plan instead of just a press release, it still will draw support across the aisle. There is a very good chance that this bill will make it to the president's desk in the next few months. Well, that is it for this episode of The Landscape. I'm going to hop on my soapbox on our way out. If you are enjoying our public lands this Independence Day, remember that they tell America's full story. No matter what this administration does to try to cover that up or erase it, from Stonewall to Amache, from Pearl Harbor to Ellis Island, from Sand Creek to Wounded Knee, from the Bering Sea to the Gulf of Mexico, these lands, these waters, these stories belong to all Americans. We all listen. We all write the history. They don't get to rewrite it. Happy birthday, America.